everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome back to Coffee Time with Mastermind. This year has been upending, upsetting, and quite traumatic. Self-care has come up a lot on this show, especially in the last couple of weeks. So today, we're going to dive deep into the idea of self-care. What exactly does it mean? And whether or not you can yoga yourself out of a state of crisis. As I say that sounds a little silly, right? You're not going to want to miss this show today. We have a lot to cover and a special guest. So we invite you to grab a cup of coffee, join the conversation for the next 30 minutes as we discuss topics that are urgent to mission-based organizations. Let's start with introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Post your comments in the chat and join the conversation and the comments as we go throughout today's conversation. My name's Rebecca Tuttle. I'm the founder and creator of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good. We help schools, nonprofits, organizations, and businesses find, write, and secure grant funding, and we teach you how to do it. I'm joined today by my co-host, Cynthia Rojas. Welcome, Cynthia. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm great.
I am Cynthia Rojas, and I'm the founder and principal of To Your Growth, which is a consulting firm that specializes in change management, organizational development, and leadership development.
Excellent. And let's bring on our other co-host, Peter Blakely of Blakely Consulting.
Good morning and happy Juneteenth. How are you doing today?
Happy Juneteenth. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm very well. Thank you.
I am Peter Blakely. I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting. I help mission-based organizations measure and maximize their impact.
And she does a great job at it too. Peter, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking on one of our shows and you said you were mad about self-care.
That's right.
So we said, what better title for today's show? Mad about self-care.
Yep.
Tell us what you meant by that.
We are talking to some people who are doing really, really hard work, and they are physically and mentally and emotionally exhausted. And there's this mantra of self-care, like, well, you should just meditate more. You should just, take more warm baths. It's personalizing what I think is a systemic problem and implying that if people continue to be traumatized and exhausted and unable to function, that it's a personal failure. They just didn't do enough self-care.
Or yoga.
Or yoga.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't wait to introduce our next guest. I'm going to bring Tom King into our stream. Hello, Tom.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for
Hi,
having me.
Tom.
How are you? So
I'm great.
we invited Tom to join us today. He started his career as a child forensic interviewer and is now the executive director of Massachusetts Children's Alliance. He holds a certificate from the Institute of Nonprofit Management and Leadership at Boston University School of Management, in addition to a Master of Social Work degree from Smith College of Social Work. He's both a human service worker and an organizational leader. Tom has a lot of experience working with, thinking about, and managing self-care. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you so much for having me and for burning out, just to put it out there.
I know, if we weren't all burnt out, we wouldn't have a topic today.
That's right.
It's the least we can do, right?
That's right. Offer ourselves up as examples.
Exactly.
Now, Tom, I understand you worked most of your career in pretty stressful settings, both in human services, which I can attest to that. That's a pretty difficult setting. And now as an organizational leader, and you've been open about your own experience with burnout. So how does burnout influence the work that you do now?
Absolutely. I am definitely a case example of how that has shifted my career. And my goal as a leader of an organization is to be very open and aware of what the staff are going through. I think the key to this is to never feel you do have the answer, but to be open and to see how, particularly now, never mind the content of the work that we're doing, but now trying to do that work in these really unusual times. So it's being mindful for me again, the role that folks have to attend to daily, coupled with what is going on now, not only just COVID, but the national headlines. And I think that for me, I wish I had a magical toolbox, but I don't. But there are certainly some things that we look to hopefully help out and make sure that what I consider the best resources of the organization, the staff, are as healthy as they can be mentally, physically, and if something is going awry, what can I do, if anything, to help out?
You know, Tom, I know Peter has a question for you, but I just want to pick up on something that you said really quick because it's going to leave my mind.
Go ahead.
I like how you said toolbox and not crystal ball. So you're trying to figure out the tools to use to bring resolve rather than predict the future and then chase whatever is to come. That's great. I'm sorry, Peter.
One of the things that came up when Tom and I were talking yesterday is vicarious trauma. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how it's relevant?
Absolutely. So pretty much in a nutshell, those of us who have worked with people who've experienced trauma, whether that is personal trauma, societal trauma, and being that person that is supposed to bring some assistance and help or relief, and how that in turn affects the person as the helper. So, I, for example, really did get super paranoid because I worked with children who'd been victims of crime. It also can lead to just absolute fatigue, kind of shutting down yourself and almost mirroring the symptoms of trauma, even though you weren't the recipient of the violence that they experienced.
And so what do you say to people who are working under incredibly stressful situations? And one of the things that I'm really conscious of is in many situations, we say that the people who are closest to the work are the best qualified to do the work. And so we have people who are themselves maybe personally affected by these issues who are now doing the work in the community. And I am concerned about compounding disadvantage in that way. And that by personalizing the responsibility, we deny or erase how that trauma is being compounded.
Well, and again, I don't have the solution, but I can absolutely agree with you. And I feel that some of the ways that I survived and was able to do something different are options that other people don't have. So I can say, I had the luxury of changing careers and doing something different for a little while. And I acknowledge full-heartedly that there are people that just can't do that. And I do think what we were talking about yesterday, people, particularly people of color, are put in these human service jobs. They seek them out. You are a hero, and heroes don't get tired. Heroes, you have to be able to move beyond this. And I think that's a huge problem. I do embrace, and you can absolutely disagree with me, I think there are some things that work for people without the expectations like, well, you have problems, go do yoga, go do meditation. I think there are places for that, but they cannot be branded as, oh, well, you missed a yoga class, so now, sorry, you're struggling. But again, it's back on you to fix your own problem. And I do think you are not surprisingly spot on that very issue. It's sure that there are some options there for you, but you also have to be in a position that you can take advantage of them and not be chastised if you're not able to participate fully.
Not just being in a position to take advantage of them, but also fitting it in with the constraints of the other demands on your time and money.
That's right.
To me, it's really problematic if somebody is traumatized at work and then they go to therapy after work and pay their own copay. Right? I feel like now you tax that individual twice. To me, that's not okay.
And I would go a step farther to say that person then has a diagnosis that will follow them wherever they go. And you can explain that as much as you want, right? You can explain that to the hilt. It is still a diagnosis that will stay with you for the rest of your life in your mental health record.
Mm.
Where do you think we went wrong, Peter? Because the truth is, when we were all young and we had these aspirations, I was developing my professional awareness in the late 80s, and women were, being part of corporate America, and wearing a briefcase was cool, and heels, and
Big shoulder pads.
yeah, working after hours or long hours was cool.
Yeah.
Where did we go wrong that now we spend so much money in creating balance? And what you're saying is that that's even a myth. So where do you think we went wrong as a society?
I think this is how our culture deals with things. We Americans tend to be, way far on the end of personal responsibility and pretty light on the side of employer responsibility. I also think it's just what the most privileged people do becomes the standard for everybody. So when low-income people worked in fields, it was fashionable to be very pale. And then when wealthy people went on tropical vacations, it was fashionable to be tanned, right? So if wealthy people have a lot of time for yoga and meditation, that becomes what everybody is supposed to do. And I'm not saying that yoga and meditation are a bad idea. In some cases, they are culturally not appropriate for an individual. And they are expensive pursuits in terms of the space required, the time you're going to spend, the fancy pants you're going to wear, right? It's not accessible to every single person.
Well, I also think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I also think too that one of the reasons why we require, air quotes, so much self-care is because we were just boom, 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 go, 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 go. Then this pandemic hit and everyone's like, wait a second, my life is not a slow-paced life. And it would be interesting to see, well, a lot of the places that provided that self-care for us shut down. So do we really need all of the self-care, the
accessories.
I don't want to say superficial, but accessory self-care that we were accessing, right? Given that we haven't had access to it over the last however many, what did you say? This is our 18th week now, Cynthia, in this?
Right? Yeah.
If my math is correct.
Wow, pandemic, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It does require, generally it requires things like a room to yourself. Not everybody has that.
That's right.
So I wonder if we weren't at such a fast pace, would there be such a need for that self-care in certain aspects? But it doesn't necessarily change the degree of the work that we all feel compelled to access something that alleviates that stress and strain. I'm curious, why are we continuing to bring solutions to problems that don't decrease? It seems like there's no relief for it. So, Tom,
right, and I go the other extreme, and I say that there's no relief for it because people can't solve their way one at a time out of this problem. The real solution is just to say some of these jobs are not doable, or it's not acceptable that this is a 40-hour-a-week job. This is actually 30 hours and 10 hours of subsidized self-care, right? And maybe organizations just need to rewrite their budgets accordingly.
Well, I think it's also compounded if you are, and this may not be the most politically correct thing to say, if you are competent at your job, then you are the recipient of more work. And then you're really in a bind where you are expected to maintain that other standard. And because you have, for whatever reason, whether you have an ability to put a shield up and you're able to do it, you then become the person that is the problem solver. And I think that's another layer to the problem in human services. So you get compounded for being good, that responsibility weighs on you even more. And so I think what you just said, really, Peter, really struck me. I have an example of a person who switched into a different arena from our work. And she didn't last very long because she said, I am now responsible for 4 programs because they liked what I did managerially. And so she left. And so again, how do you, monitor or gauge a problem that is so multi-layered? It's even beyond that person. It's kind of built into the organization. So when you talk about the budget, it's as if it's built into the culture of nonprofits. And I think we've all been there, particularly if your nonprofit is seeing a budget challenge, like, oh, if everyone could just chip in a little bit more, we're going to get through this. And so you tap the people who are able to do their job well, and then they get punished with that, and they're supposed to be grateful for more work because it contributes to their superhuman qualities, but no more pay and no time off. And, oh, you can deal with it if you're able to go to yoga. And I would also dare say, with yoga comes a whole other language you're supposed to know. Right? And so you are then faced with, oh, I better learn these terminology or else I'm not going to fit in there either. And in my little world, I experienced that. And it's, okay, I'm not even good enough for this self-care because I don't know what the hell they're talking about, frankly.
Yeah, right. I mean, I stress myself out by trying to meditate and then not being good at it. And so it's completely counterproductive. Yeah.
But don't you see?
It's an interesting point about like the people who are holding themselves together in some ways subsidizing the fact that other people can't hold themselves together.
That's right.
And when I say can't, I don't mean that they're bad people. I just mean they're not maintaining the ability to function at work at that level because they have other responsibilities and other things that they're taking care of. And I'm always thinking about the ways mission-based organizations directly or inadvertently or silently ask the workers to subsidize the work. Not just to do your job, but in little tiny ways, to use your cell phone while you're doing your job, to drive your car while you're doing your job. Things that I think some corporate organizations wouldn't ask of people, justifying it by saying this is really, really, really important work and we can't leave it undone. That's true. But it's also a way of kind of abusing people with the importance of the work that they've elected to do. I'm really disturbed by that.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of...
I know, I was going to say.
Rebecca, do you want to talk about what's happening on the comment section, which is exciting?
I would like to, yeah. So Ellen, welcome, Ellen. It's nice to have you here.
Yeah.
Ellen says, we've made self-care complicated. We sure have. And we haven't made even more complicated after today. Go to class, buy fancy clothes. But for Ellen, it's going for a walk outside. I think that's a really important point Ellen brings up, is that self-care doesn't have to be something you purchase. You could just go outside, go to the beach. My favorite piece of self-care for me, I'm a Rhode Islander through and through, Ocean State all the way, is putting my toes in the sand and taking that deep breath of ocean air. Give me that and I am good to go. I am good to go.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody has access to those resources. I mean,
not everyone does. Nope, not everyone does.
We do have to acknowledge that.
Not everyone does, you're right. And I think that's why self-care has to be what you believe it is for yourself. And to Tom's point earlier about putting all of that demand on nonprofit employees to kind of figure that piece out, I think there's a lot of social pressure for self-care as well that, is even outside of this dialogue, that who puts that social pressure there. So we also have Madeline Ann joining us. Welcome, Madeline. Madeline says she agrees with PETA that self-care is a class issue and it's not accessible to all. Absolutely. Yeah. Carissa, welcome, Carissa. Carissa Cunningham says we have to change systems. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Can I say something, Rebecca?
Please do.
I think language is really important. And Peter's point about this self-care seems to imply that I myself am responsible to care for me because I've been burdened by these structural systems. Yeah. There's this term in the literature called structural care, where organizations can implement things within their within their infrastructure to enable staff to have a balance between that really difficult work, especially if you're working with within an industry that can cause vicarious trauma, and also making sure that you are taking time to replenish your mental energy. That is structural care. I have not heard that term as much as I've heard
Very
self-care.
helpful. Yeah.
Like,
I like
Very
structural
helpful,
care a
and
lot.
invites us to think about it differently.
Yeah.
So we
And
need to
structural
change
care could really involve your board. It can involve others. So for me, what resonated clearly, because I just jumped all over it, was it takes the onus off one person and it becomes a responsibility of a lot more. It becomes a responsibility for the governance of the agency. It becomes responsible for those who are doing policies and procedures. So I love that, Cynthia.
Yeah.
I really like that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we get into the flip side of self-care. I've also heard is what happens is sometimes we are so exhausted that we use it as a way to give us permission to miss important deadlines or to not do something that we actually should be doing, right? So an example I've heard is that we'll take a nap right before a deadline because we're so exhausted, and that the excuse we give ourselves is, yes, well, this is self-care because I've been doing this for 18 hours and I'm exhausted, but now you've missed a deadline. So it's so complicated and interwoven in our heads that it can actually work against us.
And you created more stress on everybody around you by missing that deadline. So by failing to address the fact that the assignment was impossible, or
and that I've worked
the individual is exhibiting signs of trauma and fear by needing to suddenly go to sleep while they're doing the work, we're magnifying the issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, we have a lot of people joining this conversation. I want to just welcome everyone. We probably won't get through all the comments. They're awesome, though. Go back and read them, please. I just wanted to welcome Howard and welcome Frank. Frank says hello. Hi, Frank. I know Frank. It's great to have you here. Carissa, welcome. Ellen. We have some other guests. May's back with us. She has some nice comments. So this is a great dialogue today.
About the foundation's focus on funding structural care. You know, I mean, I think that's the next frontier. Foundations are starting to understand we can't only fund the work itself. We have to fund other things like capacity building and and that would be a great thing to focus on. Like, how do we take care of the people who do the work so that they can continue to do the work?
And back to what you were saying earlier, Peter, just the budget of it almost is a badge of honor if you're using your own phone, or I brought this from home, or, oh, I'm going to contribute more. And that's reinforced, and to really untangle that and say, no, that cannot be the way we structure our organization. It cannot be the way we treat those people who are working for us, with us. And I really like that point a great deal, because it's the way I think some folks survive. And it's to Cynthia's point as well about a nap. It is almost buying into that. You are now this held on high martyr. This will get you through. And that actually more damage can happen, not only to that person, but to the organization.
And it's another way that reinforces inequality.
That's right.
So, you know, an individual who earns more money or has fewer financial responsibilities might be more able to use their cell phone.
That's right.
To do their job, right? Or who for some reason has a car might be more able to use their car for work. Should we reward that? And then by extension sort of penalize the person who is supporting more family members or has other responsibilities at home? I don't think so.
No.
Okay, so Frank says, I agree with Carissa. What is needed is a bigger picture culture change. Our society is so heavily predicated on productivity that it allows for nothing else. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here. Our leadership needs to make a balance and self-care a part of organizational culture. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, change the name, because as long as we keep using self-care, then it changes the responsibility.
Yeah.
I do want to say this. There are times where we engage in activity to create more mental space or to reflect, right? Which is part of our growth process. That is different, right?
Yep.
Than having to take yoga because we have such a stressful job. Our doctor told us we are about to go on high blood pressure medication and we
Right.
need to learn how to breathe, right? So, because I know one of the comments,
Yeah.
Myra, I happen to know Myra, she has a very tough job managing crisis in New York City schools, and she deals with a lot of death. Well, she engages in a lot of activities that replenish her energy so that she can continue that hard work. She's one of the first responders when something happens. And she may call it self-care, but actually those are exercises for her. She's doing it as a way to create balance in her life. I would imagine. Myra, you can comment on that.
Yeah.
So Cynthia, do we need to rethink the model all in and of itself? What would you call it?
Yeah, I would call it structural care. I didn't invent that term. I read it.
It's okay, we'll coin it here. I'll coin it here.
We have to.
I can't trademark it, but I think we could do a show where we envision an organization that has implemented structural care, and what does that look like?
Yeah.
And then we should talk to some funders and see, can organizations do this? Can they use money, operating funds, to implement structural care? That'd be a great show.
Oh, I'm thinking for a moment about professional athletes, right? I mean, they warm up and they exercise and they cool down, and that's all considered part of their job. Could we all consider, the debrief or the hour of meditation at the end of the day part of our job? Is that the cool down?
Well, it was funny because I was even thinking, do you let folks take time out of the day to do whatever that is? And again, I know we've fallen on yoga and meditation, but
we're just picking on yoga because I don't particularly like yoga.
It's not about self-care.
Right. No, and I just I think it's, and one of the things that I would, just to be a little bit of a just the challenger, to be careful not to follow what I've seen in some of the private, where you have a basketball court and that's to overly produce those folks, right? So I think
that's accessible on campus.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. We have to think, like, it's not about just putting the infrastructure there. It's about being thoughtful. Once again, we have to separate the message from the medium.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Ellen just said something very interesting. This is so true. We don't even let people take an hour for lunch.
Yeah.
That is so true. I was talking to someone who is here, and he comes from a different country, and I was asking him about his work and has he made friends and how's it going, just on a social aspect, because he's new to America. And he said, well, I have not made friends. I said, why not? Because he's very nice. And he says, because we don't have lunch.
No.
I said, you don't get a lunch hour? He goes, no, we get a half an hour, but everybody eats at their desk.
Yeah.
He is shocked by this.
Yep.
Which, by the way, has the most bacteria anywhere in your whole office.
Which brings us to Renee's point. Renee says wellness works. The term wellness works because by definition, it is broad. And some Fortune 500 companies are bringing on wellness activities to the job site. They sure do. Like, can we envision a life where not-for-profit workers all go downstairs and have personal training sessions and massage, like, in the middle of their workday? Yeah.
This is interesting that we're talking about this, because as I'm listening to the conversation, I'm thinking about, you might get some pushback of, first, who's going to pay for that, right? Especially in fund development. I mean, we're looking for the resources wherever we are able. And secondly, organizations might push back and say, we do that. It's called team building. It's when we have retreats. It's all of that stuff. So I think now that we are social distancing, retreats might go a little bit to the wayside or look a little bit differently. Perhaps the conversation can be, how can we reframe our retreat system, our team building offerings in our culture of our organization to incorporate some of this? I'm about to say self-care, Cynthia. What did you call it?
Structural care.
Structural care into that, so that
And
some
also
of
to
that
say,
needs to be met.
You know, to respond a little bit to the point about retreats, to say it's not one size fits all.
Yes.
Right? I can't say because we all went to the park and played basketball, now everybody is calm, right? Like,
Well, and it goes to that toolbox. It goes to, well, that quick fix. And I think that's what we have to be really, really cautious of. You know, you may have some tools that will help, but, you know, I saw, Pete, I don't mean to call you out, you rolled your eyes and I did too when you hear retreat, because that's often someone else's agenda so that they can feel good and they have that checkbox that they did a retreat. When that retreat has probably led to extended daycare for some of the staff because it means a trip out somewhere else where they are like, okay, now relax, enjoy this. We are giving you this perk. And so I would say, I'm not saying that there's not a place for it, but, and again, I'm sure some of my staff are on this call, it's do it right and listen to the staff. What is it that you would want out of this time? And I think particularly in human services, particularly during this unknown, we're looking, we all do, I do, for that fix, that certainty, and be very, very careful that certainty isn't actually perpetuating the very problem you're trying to solve. And I hope have enough insight that deliverable, to use jargon, may actually be dangerous. So I would put that out too. And again, a well-done retreat, I'm all for it. I've been to more where it's pushing an agenda in the sunlight under a nice setting, and they're basically telling you what the next year is going to look like, and your job's going to be harder. So, but I'm not cynical.
We sound a little bit cynical, Tom. But
And you know what else? When we go on these retreats, how much are you supposed to bring of yourself as a personal self versus work self? And allowing people to take the position where I'm not going to blur that line. I show up here as my professional self. I meet some friends here at work, sure, but I'm not going to bring all of my personal self to a professional retreat. You know, that comes up a lot, especially when we get into the questions of how does this make you feel? Or, you know, so I it's really, because I've participated in so many of these and I felt like I don't really feel comfortable answering that with my work colleagues, you know? And
I'm like the classic introvert. I'm cringing just as you're retelling these.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It happens all the time. It happens all the time.
Forced this all of a sudden, well, we're in a different place, so share. And then there is no, talk about vicarious trauma or even traumatizing. Say someone actually does share something very personal, and then quickly you find out, either verbally or non-verbally, oops, that was too much. We really don't want to know so much about you. And that then contributes. I have to say, I am not a big fan of those. Well, we have a facilitator who's now going to share something really personal. I think those, I've only experienced them go badly. I've never really experienced something going really, really well when all of a sudden you are asked to share something about yourself. And if someone's doing it appropriately or really doing it genuinely, rather, they're probably going to say, I just, I have 3 kids who were yanking on me as I was trying to get out the door, and that contributes significantly to my ability to work here.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that.
Right.
No. We could have an entire show on icebreakers that Vita hates.
Oh my God.
Anybody who's worked with me knows, like,
We're just in a pandemic.
yeah. Tom, what do you want to leave organizational leaders with? You know, what can you do when you're an executive director? Let's leave people with an action step that they could take.
I would say, and again, I hope these don't sound like cliches, listen, and when you think you have the answer, listen more. Ask, and resist feeling like, and I just experienced this, and I was delightfully reminded by the folks at work at Mass Children's Alliance, let's not check the box here. be careful that you're not also grabbing for that quick fix, because more likely than not, you're going to be causing. So I guess, again, not to sound cliche, be comfortable with not knowing. Listen to the talented people that you've brought into your organization, because I really do feel like, not that they're going to have all the answers, they are going to inform how you should lead and manage, even if that leads you to more uncertainty, to be comfortable in that, and to listen, really listen, would be my advice.
Yeah.
Cynthia, what's your big takeaway?
You know, there are little things that leaders may or may not understand how important they are. Good coffee. I've seen senior leaders fight over taking coffee out of the budget because it's too expensive, but good coffee goes a long way. Feeding people every once in a while is also a really good thing. I worked at an organization where the staff lounge was cut in half and the microwave was removed. I spent years reminding everyone of the day the microwave was removed.
So they wouldn't cook?
Right, so they wouldn't heat up their lunch.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was just, and so it's just crazy. These little things matter, right? So you don't talk to me about I can't afford to bring a yoga. Poor yoga. We like yoga, by the way. But I can't afford to bring a Zumba teacher to my organization. But you know what? We could afford really good coffee. So let's invest in that. And let's invest in a non-caffeinated drink to take care of the people who don't drink caffeine. So
let's re-examine our working hours and say,
God, yeah,
hey, maybe people who do this work should have 3 weeks of vacation instead of 2. Maybe this isn't a 40-hour-a-week job. Maybe it's a 35. Maybe we give people permission to take time out of the day and model it ourselves by walking out of the office and saying, oh, I have to go to my chanting group now, or I have to go to my therapy appointment now. I'd like show everybody that that's an acceptable way to, to conduct yourself during the workday.
I love that.
Yep.
Wow, we are 37 minutes into this.
Yeah.
I
think May said we need a sequel to this show. I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peter, why don't you close us out with your big takeaway?
My big takeaway was the idea of structural care. That we have to take the self out of self-care and think more globally about what does it mean to take care of ourselves and each other. And that we also have to contemplate this through the lenses of various issues like equity and access.
Yeah.
Tom, we can't thank you enough. I hope you enjoyed your visit with us today.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? This was uplifting for me. Thank you so very much. And I hope I'm asked back.
Absolutely.
Or I will be in the chat box listening to this wisdom. I can't thank you enough. I benefited from this immensely, and I look forward to our paths crossing again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who joined the conversation today. Don't forget to grab your cup of coffee and tune in next Friday at 10:30 for Coffee Time with Masterminds. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.